We all have a need for the reassuring message that actions have appropriate consequences, and that success will reward wisdom and courage. Many business books are tailor-made to satisfy this need. An investment said to have an 80% chance of success sounds far more attractive than one with a 20% chance of failure. The mind can't easily recognize that they are the same. Managers think of themselves as captains of a ship on a stormy sea. Risk for them is danger, but they are fighting it, very controlled. There are some conditions where you have to trust your intuition. Optimistic people play a disproportionate role in shaping our lives. Their decisions make a difference. They are inventors, entrepreneurs, political and military leaders, not average people. They got to where they are by seeking challenges and taking risks. The planning fallacy is that you make a plan, which is usually a best-case scenario. Then you assume that the outcome will follow your plan, even when you should know better. A story is about significant events and memorable moments, not about time passing. The only test of rationality is not whether a person's beliefs and preferences are reasonable, but whether they are internally consistent. The proper way to elicit information from a group is not by starting with a public discussion, but by confidentially collecting each person's judgment. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is when you are thinking of it. If you care about being thought credible and intelligent, do not use complex language where simpler language will do. When you analyze happiness, it turns out that the way you spend your time is extremely important. It is hard to agree with reality if you cannot agree with yourself. The effects of high optimism on decision-making are, at best, a mixed blessing. But the contribution of optimism to good implementation is certainly positive. The main benefit of optimism is resilience in the face of setbacks. The confidence people have in their beliefs is not a measure of the quality of evidence, but of the coherence of the story the mind has managed to construct. Substituting one question for another can be a good strategy for solving difficult problems. Because it is much easier, as well as far more enjoyable, to identify and label the mistakes of others than to recognize our own. Independence is a prerequisite for the wisdom of crowds. If people are not making their own judgments and are relying instead on what other people think, crowds might not be so wise after all. People who make judgments behave as if a true value exists, regardless of whether it does. You are more likely to learn something by finding surprises in your own behavior than by hearing surprising facts about people in general. A reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition. Because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. Authoritarian institutions and marketers have always known this fact. Our comforting conviction that the world makes sense rests on a secure foundation, our almost unlimited ability to ignore our ignorance. Intelligence is not only the ability to reason, it is also the ability to find relevant material in memory and to deploy attention when needed. The idea that the future is unpredictable is undermined every day by the ease with which the past is explained. This is the essence of intuitive heuristics. When faced with a difficult question, we often answer an easy one instead, usually without noticing the substitution. We are prone to overestimate how much we understand about the world and to underestimate the role of chance in events. The law asserts that if there are several ways of achieving the same goal, people will eventually gravitate to the least demanding course of action. We can be blind to the obvious, and we are also blind to our blindness. The confidence that individuals have in their beliefs depends mostly on the quality of the story they can tell about what they see, even if they see little. Mood evidently affects the operation of System 1. When we are uncomfortable and unhappy, we lose touch with our intuition. These findings add to the growing evidence that good mood, intuition, creativity, gullibility, and increased reliance on System 1 form a cluster. When in a good mood, people become more intuitive and more creative, but also less vigilant and more prone to logical errors. Familiarity breeds liking. The test of learning psychology is whether your understanding of situations you encounter has changed, not whether you have learned a new fact. Acquisition of skills requires a regular environment, an adequate opportunity to practice, and rapid and unequivocal feedback about the correctness of thoughts and actions. People tend to assess the relative importance of issues by the ease with which they are retrieved from memory, and this is largely determined by the extent of coverage in the media. Risk does not exist out there, independent of our minds and culture, waiting to be measured. Human beings have invented the concept of risk to help them understand and cope with the dangers and uncertainties of life. You can see why the common admonition to act calm and kind, regardless of how you feel, is very good advice. You are likely to be rewarded by actually feeling calm and kind. Luck plays a large role in every story of success. It is almost always easy to identify a small change in the story that would have turned a remarkable achievement into a mediocre outcome. Self-control and deliberate thought apparently draw on the same limited budget of effort. Even in the absence of time pressure, maintaining a coherent train of thought requires discipline. You like or dislike people long before you know much about them. You trust or distrust strangers without knowing why. You feel that an enterprise is bound to succeed without analyzing it, whether you state them or not. You often have answers to questions that you do not completely understand, relying on evidence that you can neither explain or defend. You are not always the same person, and you are less consistent over time than you think. But somewhat reassuringly, you are more similar to yourself yesterday than you are to another person today. Economists think about what people ought to do. Psychologists watch what they actually do. All of us would be better investors if we just made fewer decisions. The thought of accepting the large sure loss is too painful, and the hope of complete relief too enticing, to make the sensible decision that it is time to cut one's losses. Jumping to conclusions is efficient, if the conclusions are likely to be correct, and the costs of an occasional mistake acceptable, and if the jump saves much time and effort. We don't choose between experiences. We choose between memories of experiences. Even when we think about the future, we don't think of our future normally as experiences. We think of our future as anticipated memories. You can do several things at once, but only if they are easy and undemanding. True intuitive expertise is learned from prolonged experience with good feedback on mistakes. Every night for the next week, set aside 10 minutes before you go to sleep. Write down 3 things that went well today and why they went well. The odds are that you will be less depressed and happier.